There have been many moments in sporting history where a lead has just gone. The Yankees throwing that 3-0 lead against the Red Sox in 2004 or whenever it was. There's the Bruins in the 2010 Stanley Cup. The Patriots missing out on that 16-0 perfect season. And Tottenham Hotspur and the Maple Leafs just, well, all the time. But in motorsport, it's rare to see somebody have everything taken away from them within yards of the finish line at the biggest event of the year. There was a GP2 race at Monaco where a driver celebrated too early, and we've seen things happen in 2008 in Formula 1 which, let's be honest, was far beyond Massa's control. That was divine intervention, bad timing, whatever you want to call it. See also the Toyota at Le Mans in 2016. But for it to all come unravelled just meters, yards, whatever unit of measurement you use from the finish line, look no further than the 2011 Indianapolis 500. It was a special event, that Indy 500. 100 years of the race, even though it wasn't the 100th running. There was no race in 1917 or 1918 because of World War I, and there wasn't one between 1941 and 1945 because of World War II. Now, checking notes, I think those are the only times the race has been flat out cancelled, and the only time the race was held outside of May was in 2020, which must have messed more than a few people around because from what I've seen, this race loves its tradition. But either way, the race was marketed as the Centennial, despite the actual 100th running of the race being in 2016, and in the team department there had been an itty-bitty little shake-up. Dan Wheldon, who was a two-time Indy champion and the Indy 500 winner back in 2005, was out of a seat. Several things such as lack of sponsorship led to Wheldon leaving Panther Racing at the end of the 2010 season, and its replacement had been a young up-and-comer called J.R. Hildebrand. Hildebrand had dominated the Indy Lights Championship, which is their version of F2, in 2009, and because the Panther car was sponsored by the National Guard, having an American in the car versus a bloke from the home counties was probably a better business decision. And it must have been a bad time for Wheldon as well, because Panther was where he got his start in 2002, so for the first part of 2011 he was just doing media work, doing a bit of commentary, doing a bit of punditry, that kind of thing, and actually proved to be quite popular doing so. But then he announced that he was going to be driving in the Indy 500 for Brian Herter, and a lot of people said he was crazy for doing it. He's been winless for 2 seasons, and now he's joining some minnow upstart that has no... Well, I mean, it's got racing pedigree. I mean, it's Brian Herter, but they've got little to no backing. This is desperation. This is madness. This isn't going to end well. Why are you doing this? Wheldon and Herter had been teammates at one point, and Herter had got a small operation with support from Sam Schmidt. It was all last minute, and Herter's team was being run on the level of an Indy Lights team rather than a full-on IndyCar team. Imagine a F2 team turning up and trying to race in Formula 1 with a car from last year, because that's basically what happened. Only this car was from 2003. Am I reading that right? I am reading that right, aren't I? Right, okay, so the IR03 and the IR05 are the same thing, just that there was an aero kit upgrade at some point. Gotcha. Right, carrying on. So a 9-year-old chassis against the might of Penske & Co. Good luck. And the little guy at Indianapolis isn't exactly uncommon. As a more recent example, in 2019, Hunkos Racing turned up for the Indy 500, and at the last minute, virtually all of their sponsors pulled out. So there was this white, green and orange car just going around with, well, no stickers on it. That team then proceeded to bump Fernando Alonso out of the top 33 on bump day. It's a bit like those FA Cup giant killings where Arsenal get knocked out by Solihull Moors. Now, speaking of bump day, those on screen made it to the top 33. This is like the final chance for people to get into the top 33 because that's the most amount of people that can compete in the Indy 500. Because tradition, and it's a multiple of 3, so you can have the start procedure because they start 3 wide, again, because tradition. It was quite the hectic moment since Marco Andretti, who got himself into 28th on the grid, went out right at the death. And with 55 seconds left in the whole day's running, he bumped his teammate Ryan Hunter-Reay out of that top 33. Wheldon, meanwhile, didn't have to worry about any of that. He was safely through, and the little minnow with a 9-year-old chassis qualified in 6th. Alex Tagliani, driving for Sam Schmidt, was on pole, and on the qualifying results there you should see some names that might be recognisable to you, as well as 4 female drivers. Danica Patrick, Simona De Silvestro, Pippa Mann and Anna Beatrice. You'll also notice that Hunter Ray is on the grid despite him not qualifying, and this is due to a bizarre rule, at least to me and most other Europeans, that allows a team owner to approach another team owner and arrange for a non-qualifying driver to race the Indy 500 in a qualified car. Unlike the previous 2 years, the start went without incident, well, the first 2 laps went without incident, and the first yellow flag came out on lap 18 when Takuma Sato put his car in the wall. In the ensuing melee of the pit stops, Will Power left his pit box with only 3 wheels on his wagon. This is also the first year in Indy 500 history that restarts were 2 wide. A little bit later on, De Silvestro was disqualified while black flagged from the race, basically pulled in because she was being too slow, partly due to not recovering fully from the burn she suffered earlier in the year. In the latter stages of the race, there was a 40-lap period where the green flag stayed out, and the lead chopped and changed more than a few times before another caution was called on lap 158 due to Townsend Bell and Ryan Briscoe hitting each other. Penske had a shocker of a day, to be honest, and Hildebrand, Franchitti and a smattering of others pulled some moves on strategy to try and make the end without stopping again. The tactic worked for Hildebrand but not so well for Franchitti. Franchitti was looking marginal, but Hildebrand was going to be pretty much fine. And as the field shuffled as other people had to pit during the green flag racing, it looked like a total outsider called Bertrand Baguette, a Belgian guy who was racing in that Indy 500, might end up winning the Indy 500. So Franchitti had to slow down and Baguette pitted with just 3 laps remaining. Hildebrand took the lead from Wheldon, who had managed to overtake Scott Dixon. Hildebrand had himself a decent cushion as he took the white flag, and it looked like a rookie was going to win for the first time since Castroneves in 2001. But Hildebrand got on a dirty part of the track trying to overtake Charlie Kimball and shunted into the outside wall, crawling towards the line as Wheldon passed with less than 400 yards to run. So the guy who had no full-time drive became the winner. I don't know if that's happened before or since. I guess that's the same as Mick Schumacher subbing for George Russell later this year and winning a race in Formula 1. But not only was it a one-off drive winning the race, but a minnow team had done it, beating Andretti, Penske, Ganassi and the others. Such is the magic of the Indy 500. If you're there at the end, you've got a chance. And that team was happy with just finishing second. They were happy with what they already had. So imagine the scenes in the paddock when the white and day-glow orange car crossed the line ahead of the mangled National Guard car that was being driven by the race winner's replacement. Now, in relation to all those teams mentioned at the top of the video, to call it a choke is probably a little bit unfair. It's probably fairer to use the term rookie error. But I don't know anything about the Indy 500. I mean, if Hildebrand had waited and then got on the straight to overtake that lapped car, would that have caused Wheldon to get too close? Or at least too close for comfort? The answer's on a postcard, please. But looking back, it's a bittersweet ending. Wheldon would go back to commentary and was also asked by Dallara to test the new IR12 that would be taking over from the IR05 for the following season. But while racing at the final round of the season at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, Wheldon was involved in a horrendous smash that, again, looking back, was totally avoidable and was warned about by other drivers. He didn't survive, and the IR12 would later be renamed the DW12 until the IR18 upgrade came in 2018. And in a way, it's kind of the most painful victory in motorsport history, at least in my lifetime, knowing what comes later. And there's that picture as well of, you know, the sort of celebratory picture they do after the Indy 500. We have the race winner with the family and things like that. So it's got Wheldon, it's got the car, it's got his wife, it's got his 2 boys. And one of those boys is only 3 months old, if that. And then, end of the year, Vegas happens. And that leads into probably the most haunting little bit of commentary I've ever heard in regards to a motor race. The TV presenter on the American broadcast, which I watched for the video I did on, you know, Wheldon's crash and everything that happened that day. I probably should revisit it at some point. And I didn't mention this in that video, but I'll mention it now. And that is, I mean, I can't even remember which one of the TV presenters it was, said something to the effect of, why is it we always say until next time when we part? You know, you go out for a couple of drinks with friends and you say, oh yeah, until next time, see you later. And that's because goodbye is always so final. And then he closes the broadcast with, goodbye, Dan Wheldon. I mean, I've got no clue of where I'm going to go from this point. I'll see you next time, I guess.